Mike, take me back long, long ago. Well, not too long, but when did sports broadcasting first become like a thought on your mind?
So we got to go to the best resource for me, and that's my mom. And she'll tell you that as a little kid, this is what I pretended to do, what I wanted to do. And I'd say early on in junior high school, the equivalent of middle school, but in New York City public schools, it was called junior high school. I had taken an interest to sports, and I was just getting to the point where I knew I wasn't going to be good enough to be a high school football or baseball player. I'd hoped to play baseball and didn't. Uh, I wanted to be around sports, so there were two avenues left: media or medicine. Not a good science guy, so I went to the media side right away. And boy, did I enjoy it. Enjoyed writing about high school sports for the local newspaper, for the high school newspaper. Did some work for the local newspaper during the summer as well. We didn't have a radio or a TV station, but those were the kind of things I got involved with. And then I found out through being a sports fan that Marv Albert and Bob Costas and a gentleman named Len Berman, who are all very influential, well-known New York area sportscasters, and for Bob and Marv National, that they went to Syracuse. And then further minimal digging found that Dick Stockton was a Syracuse alum. And a guy named Marty Glickman, who way back in the day was a legendary athlete, kind of started this whole series of Syracuse folks going into the sports media business. So that's where I wanted to go. It was first generation college. That's where I ended up going to school, and that's the beginning of the roots of all of what I've been doing now for almost 40 years.
Yeah, I have a feeling I'm going to have a few Syracuse grads on this
Yeah,
podcast when it's all said and done. Jason Stark was an early episode. He got the ball rolling.
there you
So,
go. There you go.
um, so you're at Syracuse,
Yeah.
which, as you said, the place to be for broadcasters. And I read that you got a job at WTVH while you were still in school. So
Yes.
how did that all kind of come to be?
So let me go backwards first because I
Yeah.
still didn't know if I wanted to be a writer or a
Okay.
broadcaster, and now it's a lot of one and the same, right? Um, So I got to the Daily Orange and brought, which is the student newspaper on campus at Syracuse. Jason Stark's one of the many people who've come through there. Lots of folks who cover the NFL, who you read around the country online, or those seven of us who still grab a newspaper and physically hold it. A lot of them were writers at the Daily Orange on the Syracuse campus. And I brought here my high school stories and things like that. And I got hired as a freshman as the field hockey beat writer,
Okay.
which does not sound like it is a big deal, but at the Daily Orange, apparently for a freshman, it was a big deal. It was the fall, it was the first part of the season on campus. So I was doing both, and it was there that I discovered my preference was describe the action as it happened, not watch it and then write about it or write as the game is ending or things like that. And that's where the path led me away from a writing career to more of a TV career. I still love when I get to write. We do a lot of writing in the business stuff. We write a tease or an open or some of the off-air things that we do at the Olympics. So I still love that writing gene, and it was a tough decision for me at that time because I did enjoy it, but it's where I ended up gravitating towards, and obviously I'm glad I did. And to your question, I was working in Syracuse on the campus radio station where a lot of us have worked over the time. And in 1987, I was interning at a local TV station, the CBS station in town, and they offered me a job. They went through three weekend sportscasters and about eight weekends, uh, leaving for a variety of reasons. And I was lucky enough that the news anchor in the market who knew me as an intern also knew my broadcasting on the college radio station suggested, hey, we should give Mike a try. And I was young and cheap and was willing to stay for more than 6 weeks. And that's how I got my start in TV. And so my senior year, I was thinking about leaving and going pro early and decided to stay and finish, got my degree. I will tell you the funniest part, Kevin, of that is it was my best academic year on campus, except my TV news reporting class where I got a B.
Oh no.
And you say, wait a minute, I've got a job. I'm doing TV news reporting stories 3 days a week on TV. But an older professor, kind of dyed in the wool, veteran, had a stickler for rules. He said part of the grade is being in class. And because I was on the road covering football with Syracuse or doing stories or had a high school story to shoot, I didn't get to every class. So while I still am disappointed that I didn't have the one shot to close out a 4.0 semester, I'm really glad because that is the reminder that, as you know, so much of our job is you've got to be there. And
Oh
so
yeah,
that was
yeah.
a reinforcing bit of that. And somehow the lessening of my GPA for that reason, it hasn't cost me too much just yet.
I was saying, I love that you still remember that that was the B,
Oh my
all these
God!
years later.
Of course I do. I'm leaving the professor nameless because he doesn't deserve. He did the right thing, not the wrong thing. But I remember all of it.
So, if I got this right, you're doing radio at WFBL and TV at WTVH. So that was kind of like your
Correct.
first, full time job, correct,
Right.
out of college.
Correct.
How would you kind of describe what your responsibilities were and balancing those two mediums?
Yeah, great question. The radio was do a once a week call-in show, and then do morning sports on an FM hard rock station. All right, so it was just 3 or 4 minute sports segments at 6:50, 7:50, 8:50 on the Fat Man's Wake Up Service on 104.7 Kicks FM. I still remember the whole deal, right? Um, it was for me coming up in radio. I loved radio and kept radio part of my career as long as I could. And still, even once a year, get to dabble in radio, calling the Masters on radio. And I love the medium. If I'm driving, obviously podcasts now have become a big thing, but I love listening to radio talk shows and all the things that go with radio and games on the radio. Baseball games during the summer on radio still have a magic to me that in some ways I'd rather listen to a game than watch it on TV. So radio always stayed a part of me because I think it was part of my roots growing up in the industry and the business. Um, the balance, we were so young, you didn't know any better. So, you leave an academic life for a professional life, and now you don't have to worry about your other major, which is political science for me, or your arts and sciences requirements. It's just sports and sports and sports and sports. So the balance was pretty easy, and it was fun to do both. I think the fact that, albeit very limited and very early, that I had some writing experience and have had radio experience of calling games, doing a talk show, interviewing guests, and then had the experience of TV in the studio at the desk and then calling games. I think it helps me appreciate significantly the talents of people and what it takes to cover the Bears beat day in, day out, and be consistent and try to break stories where you have 20 or 25 other writers in the same place with the same kind of access, right? You don't do it, but it's nice to know that you have a muscle that you can recognize. Okay, this is a good reporter. I'm going to read Kevin's Bear stuff because I know he's there and he's covering it. Those types of things I think are valuable for experience for me for having been a part of all three of these different mediums.
There was a newspaper ad for your talk show that I found, and it's the picture. It's a picture of you, and it
Yeah.
says, "You won't see Mike Tirico on WFBL. You can hear him and talk to him on
There you go.
Sports Sunday or Sports with Mike Tirico." Just it's funny because I'm looking through it and seeing the picture. It's what did that show mean to you? And I saw that sometimes they took the show on the road a little bit.
Yeah,
What did it mean to kind of have that opportunity to talk to listeners and just talk sports for an hour, especially at that young age?
yeah. I think it's an interesting part of sports fandom. There's a passion for teams and games that you only get when people call into a talk show, or you interact with them in some live event. And I think even more people, we get the same small group of people who call the show. It wasn't exactly a rating success, right? But we would do the local news from the New York State Fair, which was in Syracuse, and you'd meet hundreds of viewers every day for 10 straight days at the state fairgrounds. And we'd take the 5 and 6 o'clock newscast out there and talking to fans about their teams. It just reminds you who we work for, really. I mean, of course, we work for The Athletic or for NBC or ESPN back in an earlier time for me. But what we really work for are the fans because we're the connection and the conduit to their great passion, which is sports and the athletes who they cover, and they're the economics of it, whether it's cable bill, subscriptions, tickets. The fans are the economics of sports in the 20th, 21st century. So just to have that chance early on, I really enjoy that. And usually, if I get to an NFL city, I like to listen to just a little sampling of calls or the vibe from the hosts of a team and a fan base, because I think it just lets you maybe make a statement during a game that lets them know we get in general what you're feeling, right? We get the angst of the Bears quarterback situation because we've heard about it for the last 30 years. And it goes from, oh my gosh, we don't have a guy that Caleb Williams has a good game or a good week or a good practice, and now we've got our guy. So that's a fun thing. I think it's kept me in the mindset of always have an idea of what the barometric pressure of the fan base is before you go in. It helps you speak to the audience that is hanging on your every word more than anybody else.
There's just a small line in a newspaper article says dial twisting. ESPN has added a new face to its Sports Center roster. He's Mike Tirico, formerly sports director at WTVH in Syracuse, New York. Uh, 24 years old, you get the job at ESPN. Walk me through how that all came to be.
Yeah, fortunately for me, an ESPN executive who's remained a good friend over the years, and we work in different capacity now, had a vacation home up that way and saw me on the local news, and I had, as many do at that time, we were sending out our videotapes to different places where we hope to get hired, and I was very happy in Syracuse. So the places I would send a tape to might be to Buffalo or to New York City where I came from, or Chicago or big city, where you'd like to live or work. And then you send it to CNN or ESPN to the people who hire there. That process began, and the executive from ESPN saw me and they contacted me and said, send us a tape in a year. You're young, you're not ready. And I sent the tape in 10 months. And timing and opening and opportunity, they had a spot that they were looking to fill with someone. And I was brought in and did the 2:30 a.m. Sports Center with Jim Bergamo, Ann Myers, Chris Myers, I should say, Ann Montgomery, I beg your pardon, Ann Montgomery. Chris Myers was the one who became my regular partner on that show. And then the dovetail of that was that broadcast ended up being replayed in the mornings before ESPN, way back in the day, would show fitness shows in the morning. And the executives in both Bristol and New York would see the show, the half hour Sports Center, that Chris Myers and I were co-hosting, and that really was a big influence for us to get a higher profile. Chris through Baseball Tonight, Up Close eventually, and me within college football, college basketball, and eventually a studio host there. So though that little break, the timing there that was really significant was the execs started to see our show in the mornings and gave us a chance to be seen by a lot more people who could make influential decisions and change the course of both of our careers. And Chris now that calls NFL games for Fox in addition to hosting NASCAR. And we'll connect every once in a while if he comes through Detroit or I'm out on the West Coast or he's somewhere. I see him doing Daytona, and we'll kind of laugh that we've come a long way in the 30 some odd years from hosting the 2:30 a.m. half hour sports centers together.
So, what were your hours when you were doing that?
Yeah, so you kind of work like 5 or 6 to 3 a.m. Really, you got out of there by 3:30 because the show re-aired. So the last segment of the show, you had to tape a new ending to the show for the overnight. The show would air on ESPN's international platform. So we would do close for the Pacific Rim Sports Center, right? So you have no idea who's sitting out there. And Chris Myers was always a jokester, a Johnny Carson devotee and wannabe. First few nights we do the Pacific Rim close. Like, if you're watching on the Pacific Rim, hang on. And that was just one of his many funny lines that still sticks in my mind. Hearing it at 3:20 in the morning when we'd record that. So those were great times because sports. was booming at that time. And it was right around that time that ESPN was close to acquiring the rights for all four leagues and colleges. And there was just exited the NBA, but college basketball, college football, NFL, Major League Baseball all had a place on the ESPN platforms and the NHL as well. And I think that really was the growth of ESPN, plus the talented people that were there doing Sports Center. God rest his soul, Tom Mees, but Dan Patrick, Bob Lee, Gary Miller, Robin Roberts, Charlie Steiner, right? All those, Linda Cohn, Carl Ravitch, all those people. That was the kind of the sport. Chris McKendry, that was the Sports Center team. And then ESPN2 went on with the addition of Keith Olbermann and Stuart Scott and Susie Colbert, Bill Pito, Deb Kaufman, just a whole bunch of people. So like it was the great time for that, and that also allowed, as they expanded, to do more stuff, to get away from the desk and start calling games, which is where most of the rest of my career kind of had its biggest impact.
I was going to ask, do you remember your first ESPN play-by-play?
Ah, do well, yes, I do. The first main one was calling college basketball.
Okay.
But the first one is on one of the most memorable days, or the day after one of the most memorable days in American sport. Maybe if you've seen the documentary that ESPN did about the day in June of 1994 where
Yeah.
OJ Chase, NBA finals with the Knicks and the Rockets, opening of the World Cup in Chicago, Arnold Palmer's last round at the U.S. Open at Oakmont. Several other things happened. That's that the greatest sports day in terms of memories in U.S. history. So the next day, I called my first game on ESPN. It is a Florida versus Georgia high school football game in Daytona Beach. And my color commentator is Lee Corso.
Oh, wow.
And true story, the OJ chase is going on. We are not staying in a five-star hotel in Daytona Beach. We are in a minimal star hotel in Daytona Beach. And Lee's right next door to me. And the OJ chase is going on. And here it is, early evening. I get a knock on the door, and it's Corso. Are you watching this? And Lee comes in the room. It's small. He sits on the edge of the bed, and we watch about 15 minutes of the OJ chase together, as it's happening. And then the next day we do this game, and good players in that game, like Hines Ward, who caught a touchdown in a Super Bowl 40 in Detroit, with the Steelers and the Seahawks. Hines Ward was in that game, among, I think, maybe a half dozen NFL guys. So that was the first play-by-play broadcast I did for ESPN in June of 1994.
Mike, there's a few questions I ask every guest. So the first one
Sure.
is your welcome to the big leagues moment. I don't know if it was back at Syracuse, just kind of it could be however you
Yeah.
describe it. The first time you recognize people are watching you and listening to you, or the
Okay.
first, yeah, go ahead. What do
Yeah.
you
No.
got?
No. 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 Okay. That narrows it down a little bit. Yeah. It's probably, the now JMA Wireless Dome in Syracuse was the Carrier Dome, named after Carrier Air Conditioning. Although most people didn't realize that was a Syracuse was their home. Going to that venue for years was a college student, and that's the place where I go to games. And then after you start doing local TV and people start to recognize you, like going to a game at the Dome and people call out your name from the stands, and they're not your college buddies, but they're people who are residents of Syracuse. That's when you realize, wow, this is kind of different all of a sudden. And then I think we all go through the progress from there to going to the supermarket or getting coffee or things like that, and people know who you are and recognize you, which is extraordinarily embarrassing and uncomfortable. It's just we have a job and people see us do our job. Doesn't make it any more important than the millions of people who do their job every day. But um, there's a weird emotional connection, Kevin, with viewers and that rectangle of a TV screen. You don't stop to think about on a Sunday night if we're doing a game, people are watching on their phone, people are watching on some 50-inch TV in their TV room, people are watching on an airplane, people are watching on a but you still have this one-to-one connection with each viewer, and they feel like you're a part of their life. I mean, nobody should be forced to listen to me for 3 hours. or to Collinsworth, but they listen to us for 3 hours, right? And what other point in life or other job in life do you have where people listen to you for all that long, talking about something you're interested in? So it creates when it repeats, right? During Sunday Night Football every week, or during the Olympics when it's 17 straight nights on primetime, which nobody ever gets to do in TV. Even if you do the nightly news, it's 5 nights a week and you're off on weekends. But for 17 straight nights, you are invited into people's lives, homes, and that creates that uniqueness that is uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of us because don't want those accolades. It's just the recognition of, hey, I know you. You were in my TV room. You're on my phone. I see your face. It's a different vibe, and it's a unique part of what we do for a living.
So you mentioned the Olympics. Over the next year, you got Sunday Night Football on NBC, Super Bowl 60, primetime host for the Winter Olympics in Italy, and the NBA is coming back to NBC,
Yeah.
and you're going to be obviously the lead play-by-play guy for that. It's just incredible accomplishments, Mike, to be able to say like those are all the things you're gonna be doing just in the next 8, 9, 10 months. What's the through line? I always ask people what the through line is from the beginning of your career to now. The things that you honed, the things that you learned, whether it was at ESPN or Syracuse, that still matter today for you to kind of do your job at the level you're doing it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's that still a sports fan.
Yeah.
I still enjoy sports. I like going to, we live in Michigan. I like going to Tigers games as a fan and sitting in the 25th row and watching a game and having a beer and enjoying a game. I enjoy watching the Little League World Series when it's on, just to watch, to put a score bug up there, and I love following that. I do enjoy sports for the competition. I do appreciate the athletes and what they do, even as you get to know them and then get to work with them, right? And they become friends, colleagues, teammates in a different light. I enjoy that still a lot. And I hope when I no longer can relate to fans and I no longer enjoy the games for just the sport of it, I hope that that's the point where I'll move on to something else in life and try to fix my golf swing. Um, I still love watching a game, and I think through the Olympics, the storytelling that happens there, and the coming together of the world, or the NBA, the best basketball players on the planet all want to be here. Or the NFL, the biggest entertainment vehicle that America has right now. Look at the valuation of franchises, the interest level for people, all of those things. I, s- I still enjoy the competition and watching people try to be their physical, athletic best. And that's the through line for me for all the stuff we get to do.
Last one for you, Mike. The I want to ask everybody. Podcast is called Breaking In.
Right.
I'm sure you talk to a lot of young people. It's an interesting time in our industry,
Mm.
but these games still need sportscasters. These games are still being written about. There's content creators everywhere now. Content creator wasn't a thing, when
Right.
you started, when I started, but
Right.
now it's a thing. But what is
Right.
your kind of go-to advice to people who were trying to find their way into this industry?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, AI hasn't replaced us yet. So that's a good sign. So we got a few years. I always tell the young men and women who are thinking about getting into the industry, wait a few years. Don't take our jobs just yet. Uh, but having curiosity, having passion for sports, and preparation are the essentials to doing this and succeeding because it will take you away on weekends and holidays and birthdays and different things like that. They never consult us when putting the schedule together, right? So we've signed up for a job where we don't control as much of the time frame as maybe if you have a Monday to Friday job and you can ask for a day off and things like that. So you have to really be dedicated to it, loyal to it, be critical. Your ability to criticize your own work honestly, take criticism, I think is very important as well. But for me, if I come back to the number one thing that separates, I think, the best people long term who do this, it's preparation. You know, your ability to take the time and get it right is so important. And I think fans look at any of us in media jobs, we are the connection conduit vehicle between you as a fan and this coach, this player, this GM, etc. And we have to try to ask what interests the fans and try to let them know what this person you care about thinks, says, does, how they do it, and why is it important to this team trying to win or lose. I think in our job now as sportscasters, we have to document, inform, and entertain. And in that order, we've got to document the game and inform you about everything around it. And you have 100 different options at the end of the remote with your thumb to go watch a series on Netflix or something on Apple TV or another game on another channel. Hopefully, our game is good enough to keep you there. And if it's not, we can entertain you, which doesn't mean, stand on our head and start telling jokes. It means, what's a great story about Kevin? What's a great story about this quarterback? Or why is this team wear these uniforms, right? Something you can take to the water cooler the next day, or you can care about the athlete. So I think if you prepare, all those things can happen. So it always boils down to enjoy the job. Don't take yourself as being more important than the people who are playing the game, and prepare to do your job best you can.
Well, Mike, this has been a thrill for me, as being able to watch and listen to you for so many years, and I'm so grateful that you took the time to tell our listeners how you broke in. So thank you again.
My pleasure. Thanks, Kevin. And when do we get to hear your break-in story?
Uh, I'm thinking maybe episode 100. If I can get to
Good.
100, we'll do it, and
Invite me
we'll see.
back. Invite me back for number 100, and I'll interview you. How about that?
Perfect.
You
Perfect.
got it.
There's a line though. I will say, Paul Paps from Dan Patrick Show has already requested that, so you're gonna have to. Paulie. You might have
Maybe
to.
we'll all submit questions to you. How about
There we go. This was great, Mike. Thank you.
Kevin, thanks. Good luck. Have a great season.